Hi everybody, today I'm going to show you how to do a basic 1x1 rib on the silver reed standard gauge punch card machine. That's the model SK280, known in previous years as Knitmaster and I believe known in America and possibly also Australia as studio machines, but they all operate in the same way. So first of all, I've got my machine threaded up with some 4-ply wool, just a little bit of a leftover cone I can use for demonstrating. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just tie a knot or loop in the end of the yarn and hook it to the left hand clamp underneath the knitter table. If you do this at this stage before the beds are together, it's obviously much easier to hook it under there than trying to fiddle it through with the hook afterwards, and I'm just going to park it on the left hand side until I'm ready to use it. I've taken off my normal sink plate and replaced it with the ribber arm and put the ribber carriage onto the ribber rail. I'm ready to go. The method of knitting a 1x1 rib is explained very clearly in the instruction book. Knit 1, purl 1 rib. There's an operation table here that tells you exactly what to do at every stage of the process. So in order to set the machine up, I have to have a look at all the instructions up here and make sure that the machine and the carriages are set to what it's telling me to do here. So this first box on the left hand side is telling me that I need to have no punch card in here and the punch card reader is locked. The blob on the picture there. The next picture is telling me that on my knitter carriage I need to have the side levers set forward to correspond with the round blob symbol which is there, and that the knitter carriage needs to have the cam lever at the 6 o'clock position, which is set to knit a stocking stitch. This little thing here that I can never remember what it's called also needs to be set to the round dot position, and the drive lever is down, shown by that picture there. It says set my tension dials on both machines to 0. Make sure they're turned down to 0. On both carriages rather. Set to 0. And that for the first row, the side levers on these need to be set, on the ribber carriage needs to be set to 1. This thing down here, which I think is the pick knob, is set to the little arrow position, and this thing down here, which I forget what it's called, needs to be set to 1, as shown by that and those two symbols there. And then it says to me I need to put my ribber beds up, so that's what we'll do. Them up and engage the ribber carriage so that the two carriages are joined firmly together. Down here on the left hand side you've got your pitch lever, which needs to be set to P and to 5, shown here. Now in order to set my machine up to knit rib, I leave the carriage on the right hand side and then I pull the needles that I want to knit out to D position. I'll knit about 35 roughly. And then push the alternate needles on the ribber up in between. By pushing them up to D position, I know that they're not going to crash into the knitter needles. I've selected the right ones, and that my pitch setting is correct. Make sure that the needles are not going to be knitted or pushed right back to the non-working position. And then I run the carriage from right to left with no yarn in it, just to make sure that it's all going to knit back correctly, which it does. And then unpark the yarn and just make sure it's not caught on anything, and then just feed it into the yarn feeder onto the knitter carriage. So now we're ready to go. So the first row I'm going to do is the zigzag row. and as you see it says to knit from left to right. And after you knit the zigzag row, you insert your comb and weights. Can't remember if I told you that that tells you the needle arrangement, but that's the needle arrangement, so every alternate needle in work and the opposite ones on the ribbon bed. So after I've done that, I need to hang my comb and weights. I haven't yet taken advantage of June's useful tip to paint the middle prongs on my comb with red nail varnish, but I will do it, June, I promise I will. So I push this up from underneath with my right hand and insert the comb with my the wire with my left. And then I'm going to hang 3 of the big ribber weights, one in the middle and one at each end. Now we're ready to knit the circular rows. The purpose of the circular rows is to close off the edge of the rib cast on. And the first row will be knitting on the knitter bed, slipping on the ribber, right to left, and then left to right, knitting on the ribber, slipping on the knitter, and then right to left, same as the first one, knit on the knitter, slip on the ribber. So the first one I'm going to do is to slip on the ribber, and I need to push the left hand lever from 1 to 0 and just move the carriage across. And as you can see, I've just knitted the stitches on the knitter, hasn't touched anything on the ribber. Now to go back, I need to slip the knitter carriage, so I'm going to set the cam on the knitter from stockinette to slip, so at the 7 o'clock position, and leave the ribber carriage as is, because the right hand one for that direction is pointing down, is on 1. Knit back, and as you can see it's just knitted on the ribber, hasn't done anything to the knitter. Reset the knitter carriage back to stockinette, 6 o'clock position, and make sure your left lever on the ribber carriage is at 0, so it'll slip again and move across. That's the 3 circular rows completed. So what I'm going to do now is not compulsory, and it's my little tip for getting rid of the wavy edge on a ribber cast on. So where it's stretched across the knitting, it's going to come off when you take the comb out and look all frilly. So take a piece of ravel cord, preferably without a knot in it. Mine has just very helpfully knotted itself right at the end. Take that off. And then you're going to feed that down between the beds and lay the ravel cord in the channel between the 2 beds. So on the left hand side, poke it down there, pull it down. Make sure it doesn't get caught up on the sinker posts. And then on the right hand side, do the same thing. And just make sure that the ravel cord is lying in the channel between the 2 beds, and you're ready to go. So I need to make sure now that my machine is set up to knit the true rib, which means I put the left hand lever on here back to 1, and this is the point in time at which you adjust your tensions to suit the yarn that you're using. So this is 4 ply, so I'm going to do it on tension 3. Tension 3 on both carriages. And now we're ready to go. I'll also reset the row counter to 0, because this is normally the point in time at which you'd start counting your rib rows if you were knitting a welt or cuffs or something like that. So hold the ravel cord firmly down, both ends underneath the machine, because you don't want it to get entangled in the knitting as you make the first pass, and knit across. And you've now encapsulated that cord into the edge of the ribbing, and when you take the knitting off later, I'll show you how that works in tightening up the edge. So we're ready to go. So now you just start knitting your rib. about 10 rows or so, it's a good time to add the edge weights on so that you don't get any problems with the edge stitches not knitting off correctly. So these are the little wire pieces that look like a number 7. Hook the small river weights on them and come up between the two beds and insert the weight so that the hanger, so that the top part of the number 7 is lying between the two beds. And that will help those edge stitches to knit off, particularly if you're knitting a long piece of rib. Using the edge weights and moving them up regularly is really essential to make sure that those edge stitches knit off. Move them up again. Because the Knitmaster instructions, Silver Reed instructions, tell you to start from the left hand side, if you want to knit an even number of rib rows, you'll end up finishing on the left hand side. It doesn't really matter whether you finish on the left or the right, and if you want to then start from the right, just knit one more row. It doesn't really matter, or change over here to your knitter and knit an extra row of stockinette in whatever it is you're knitting. An extra row on either of these sections is not going to make a massive amount of difference. In order to transfer the stitches up to the knitter, make it slightly more easy, I take the carriage, put it on the ribber to the left of the knitting and move it from left to right. That then pushes the ribber needles up to the C position, upper working position, and just makes it slightly easier then to transfer them using your double-ended tool onto the knitted needle. I'll just pause for a minute until I've completed that. Help if I could find the pause button.